Amidst escalating famine and mounting global outrage, Gaza's plight reaches a critical juncture as Britain and the Netherlands signal intent to recognize Palestine, challenging the US-backed status quo. Israeli far-right ministers openly advocate for Gaza's reoccupation and settlement rebuilding. With over 60,000 Palestinians killed and 500,000 facing starvation, aid convoys falter while B'Tselem declares genocide. Can international pressure end the siege, or is Gaza vanishing under a strategy of starvation? We examine the humanitarian crisis, political upheaval, and the battle for global perception. I'm Henny Saif. This is Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The Guardian has reported that as the UN confirms famine grips Gaza, Western leaders' hollow condemnations ring hollow. Israel's deliberate starvation campaign, openly declared by its officials since day one, has been enabled by international silence and complicity. From Netanyahu's no humanitarian assistance pledge to Gallant's complete siege announcement, Israeli leaders have confessed to using hunger as a weapon. Western allies, including the UK and the US, documented these obstructions, yet continued arms sales and political support, while politicians tout symbolic gestures like airdrops and Palestinian recognition. Gaza's children starve. With over 60,000 dead and 500,000 facing famine, the international community faces an undeniable truth. Mass starvation has been allowed to unfold with full knowledge and implicit consent. According to the latest World Food Programme last report, the situation in Gaza has reached catastrophic levels, with nearly a quarter of the population enduring famine-like conditions. The desperation for food is extreme, and aid convoys are frequently coming under fire, a reality described by the World Food Programme as the worst they've ever seen. Despite these grave risks, the World Food Programme continues its vital work. While Israel recently claimed humanitarian pauses and corridors, aid delivery remains severely hampered by bottlenecks, delays, and persistent security threats on the ground. Millions are now entirely dependent on assistance, yet only a fraction of the required food is reaching them. Therefore, a sustained ceasefire is absolutely essential to ensure humanitarian aid can be delivered consistently, safely, and effectively to all those in dire need. The Haaretz has highlighted that recent protests within Israel against the Gaza war, highlighting a crucial discontent. While strong anti-war sentiments exist in Arab cities, their impact on mainstream Israeli society is limited. The article argues for a strategic shift, emphasizing the need for protests to directly confront the conscience of Tel Aviv. The core argument posed is that the current protest demands in cities like Tel Aviv focused on hostages or government change fall short of addressing the brutal reality in Gaza. The article asserts that protests must unequivocally demand an end to the war and acknowledge the crimes against humanity unfolding, forcing Israeli society to confront these truths. Ultimately, the piece calls for a more confrontational and unapologetic approach. It urges youth-led movements to disrupt the comfort of mainstream Israeli society, ensuring the call to stop the genocide in Gaza resonates not just within Arab communities, but across all of Israel, demanding an end to the conflict. Amid mounting global pressure and dire humanitarian warnings, the Gaza Strip faces unprecedented suffering. Can international recognition of Palestine bring an end to the bloodshed and starvation?
Entire neighborhoods are being wiped out. There were no living people, just rubble. Bodies are being burned in the streets. The Israelis left nothing, not even memories. Amidst the rapid developments reshaping the future of the Gaza Strip, crucial questions arise. Can the suffering of the Palestinians truly end? Will Israel continue building settlements amidst hunger and bloodshed? Is Israel turning Gaza into a mass grave of hunger? The World Food Programme reports it's only getting about 50% of the aid requested into Gaza, despite promised pauses. UNICEF and IPC reports warn of catastrophic famine, with nearly 500,000 people facing starvation. Doctors Without Borders starkly states, "We don't treat hunger, we record death." Does European recognition of Palestine constitute real pressure or merely diplomatic embellishments? The UK and the Netherlands signals intent to recognize Palestine, halting recess for emergency debates. Even Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene calls the crisis a genocide, a rare crack in US bipartisan support for Israel. But how much real pressure is this? Are settlements being rebuilt in Gaza under the guise of security and ethnic cleansing? Reports suggest Netanyahu proposed a plan to seize parts of Gaza in stages, backed by the US, to appease his far-right coalition and prevent annexation threats. This is not just about security, it's about control. Why do convoys fail while mines succeed? Despite international rulings, including from the ICJ, aid is obstructed. Médecins Sans Frontières calls airdrops futile. Is starvation a weapon? Coinciding with the UN Two-State Solution Conference, Europe's moves signal a shift, but with an expected US veto. How much can recognition translate into action at the UN? And as B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights, Israel declared genocide, with ICC warrants issued for Netanyahu and Gallant. The world watches. Will Gaza be saved before it disappears?
To shed more light on the recent updates concerning the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the devastating famine there, we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Khaled Dawood, the Al-Ahram Weekly Managing Editor, and by Mr. Ibrahim Al-Darawi, the writer and political analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to Think Tank. Dr. Dawood, how does the U.S. role in backing potential Gaza takeover plans affect the crisis? Why is the U.S. hesitating while Europe moves on Palestinian recognition?
Well, thanks, Hani, for having me. Of course, the U.S. position, particularly that of President Donald Trump, is very influential in the current crisis and contradicts his own pledges during his election campaign that less than 24 hours after getting into the White House, he'll be able to stop not just the war in Gaza, but also the war in Ukraine and many other world crises. But the result after more than 6 months is a failure on all fronts, but particularly in the case of Gaza, the situation is getting worse in a manner that basically angered almost the entire world, including inside the United States itself, where there is a clear division between the Republicans and the Democrats about the situation in Gaza. We've just seen 44 Democratic senators signing a letter to Trump warning that the system that he's been backing, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is a failure, that is not able to distribute food without killing Palestinians on a daily basis, and as well seeing the pictures that are coming out of Gaza even Trump himself could not deny the existence of a very catastrophic situation in Gaza, even contradicting the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who tried to deny that there is near famine in Gaza. But Trump himself said that basically no one sane can deny the very extremely the dangerous situation in Gaza in terms of the availability of basic foods and medicine and even clean water for drinking. But the problem is that the US president and the current administration has been giving Israel the green light to do whatever it wants in Gaza, even breaking the only ceasefire agreement that was reached a few days before Trump got into the White House. And we've seen a coordinated position in the negotiations whereby the Israeli and the American delegations pulled out from the talks in Doha. And we heard statements from the U.S. Middle East envoy, Mr. Steve Witkoff, both blaming Hamas for the current impasse, although it's very clear for all the parties taking part in the negotiations that the Israelis are setting very difficult conditions, particularly in terms of withdrawing from the Gaza Strip in the area of Rafah, the borders between Egypt and Gaza, insisting on maintaining a large presence there and along all the border areas between Gaza and Israel, basically leaving at least 30% of Gaza, if not more, under total Israeli control, and also without giving assurances that will be a permanent ceasefire and not just a temporary halt of hostilities, yes, as the Israelis have always done in the past. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, again, without the U.S. Support, it would have been very difficult for the Israelis to sustain the very obvious world pressure that we're seeing over the past few weeks, topped with the French stand in which President Emmanuel Macron first announced his intention to recognize the independence of a Palestinian state, and then shortly afterwards followed by Britain. And of course, while there are many world countries that have already recognized the Palestinian state, more than 145 countries, the declaration by France and by Britain that they are about to join those countries recognizing Palestine, yes, makes a lot of difference because they are permanent members of the Security Council.
Well, Mr. Darawi, now with France and the UK pledging to recognize the Palestinian statehood, also the US backing Israeli takeover of Gaza, can the suffering of the Palestinians truly end under the current trajectories?
I think that U.S. If the U.S. wanted to end what's going on in Gaza and the the food crisis in Gaza, if they wanted to end that, they would have ended it. They are capable of that, and Trump's administration is capable of pressuring Netanyahu and forcing him to stop the war and to stop the food war that they are having on them. And that we actually have what proved this with what happened in Iran when Trump tweeted something on X and then the war in Iran just stopped. And so what Israel is doing right now with the food crisis and the vision becoming clearer with the European countries, I think that the U.S. here we have a proof that the U.S. talked about the humanitarian crisis that are in the Gaza Strip, and it forced the other countries to take Israel's side when it came to the humanitarian truce. And so Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that he is the one behind the food crisis in Gaza. And let's say if we look at what happened in Al-Aqsa, around 4,000 convoys entered Gaza, and after what happened in Al-Aqsa and after the food crisis, it came down to only 600 food trucks, and then all the food for over 90 days there haven't been any trucks there, and today we have like 120 trucks these days. And so I think this is a humanitarian situation that Israel and the US are responsible for. And so um, Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow will go to the Gaza Strip to, to stop the humanitarian um, help that the U.S. provided. I don't think that it's working correctly, and I think that the American government is working, towards another path, which is ethnic cleansing in Gaza and forceful displacement of them. And a good proof of that is what they are doing with the Palestinians, with the food crisis. And actually, the Israeli statistics lately have said that there are around 70,000 Palestinians that have left Palestine and went to other countries. And so I think this made this bothered the Europeans.
Yes. Well,
They're not happy with what's happening in Gaza.
nobody is. Dr. Dawood, how does the Dutch Parliament's Gaza debate reflect changing European Union dynamics on Israeli policy? Does the UK parliamentary approval for Palestinian recognition signal a post-Brexit shift in the Middle East policy?
Well, let me first of all point out that in response that all these moves are coming in response to massive popular protests within Europe in general, and of course stopped with Britain. I mean, where we've seen organized protests and demonstrations on a weekly basis since the war started. And Starmer, the current British Prime Minister, has not been known as an advocate of the recognition of the Palestinian state, seeing this as a relatively early move. But at the end of the day, due to the popular pressure within Britain itself, more than 220 MPs from the Labour Party have joined in asking the Prime Minister to recognize the Palestinian state. Some people would argue that this could be a symbolic move because at the end of the day, on the ground, the Israelis continue to occupy Gaza, they occupy the vast majority of the West Bank. But at the end of the day, that's a very different shift on tone and in attitude by a key country like Britain, which originally gave the promise to the Israelis to establish their own state in Palestine back in 1947, if not dating back to 1917 with the Balfour Declaration. But at the end of the day, the moves by Britain reflects the public mood there, the recognition of the disaster and the failure of world governments to react to this unprecedented humanitarian situation, whereby we see the UN Secretary General stating that it's not only that Gaza is on the brink of famine, it's actually suffering famine, considering the number of children who die on a daily basis, the number of people who are suffering malnutrition. As you noted in your report, more than 500,000 Palestinians are basically suffering starvation.
Dr. Dawood, what do you make of the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer pledging to recognize Palestinian state unless Israel starts providing humanitarian and allowing humanitarian aid to into Gaza? Does this sound like a conditional recognition of Palestine?
It's very conditional, and probably that's an attempt by Starmer to not to anger Israel by waiving some sort of a conditional recognition, which everybody knows is not going to basically happen, because Israel and the statements by the Israeli Prime Minister and the Defense Minister of Israel are giving no indication that Israel plans to pull out from Gaza, even if a ceasefire agreement is reached. And also let me note that Mr. Starmer has also placed the refusal to annex the West Bank as another condition not to recognize the Palestinian state. And as we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister and the Israeli Finance Minister, in particular Bezalel Smotrich, that this is a golden opportunity to annex the West Bank, which is, again, many people fear, Hani, that even if the U.S. administration places pressure on Netanyahu to stop the war in Gaza, he will be asking for something in return. And this price in return would be a recognition of the U.S. Of the Israeli dominance over major parts of the West Bank, which again is a killer for the Palestinian state. So we've seen that both Israel and the United States administration, statements by the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, harshly criticizing the French position and the British position as well, saying that this is not the right time to take that kind of step, and even belittling the French position by the U.S. president, saying that France's position makes no difference, which is again, a denial of a reality that the U.S. and Israel are isolated. As you've noted, even the Dutch government, which is known to be supportive of Israel, has taken an unprecedented decision to ban the Israeli ministers of national security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and the finance minister from entering their territories after their racist and criminal statements calling for wiping out Gaza and rebuilding settlements in Gaza. It's many signs that many European countries are pushing towards a different position from that of the United States. Even if you think of Greece, Hani, which has been a destination for Israeli tourists, now it's a big problem for Israelis to dock their ships in the Greek ports because of the anti-war protests, and they've been forced to stay in their ships and not to unload from those trips because of the popular pressure. So it's a mounting situation, and we're waiting also for next September, the United Nations General Assembly, where more than 15 countries, not just the UK and France, 15 countries, including Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Malta, you name it, are going to recognize the Palestinian state.
Yes.
So even though the US and Israel act hand in hand concerning the situation in Gaza, they definitely are isolated on the walls.
Well, Mr. Al-Darawi, is it inevitable that Israel will continue building settlements amidst the ongoing hunger and bloodshed, at least up until September, before the UN General Assembly meeting in September? Is Smotrich's talk of rebuilding Gaza settlements just rhetoric or a concrete plan?
I actually think that what's happening in Gaza is, a media statement that Israel is doing, but I'm not sure if it will be applicable actually or not. So there is always the Israeli military forces always in Gaza, and they will not be able to live between around more than 2 million people, 2 million Palestinians daily, and so. I actually think that Israel's goal is to build settlements in Gaza and to go back to Gaza. And there are some petitions that have been collecting signatures. They reached around 10,000 signatures in the past few days. They are families that are going to live in Gaza and in the Gaza settlement, and they have actually collected money and funds for them. And I don't think the issue is the Gaza Strip itself. So the agreement that had Sharon out of Gaza, it was because of the safety issue that Israel is having in Gaza, and I don't think that these settlements, no one is gonna go to these settlements, and I don't think that the Israeli military force will be able to build settlements amongst the Palestinians. But if the Palestinians go out, yes, it's possible then that there will be some settlements, but the issue is not the Gaza Strip itself. It is actually the western side and the occupied places, like what happened in Al-Quds, in the Ibrahimi Mosque, and reconstruction of settlements. And we don't have, the agreements. We're talking today that the western side, there are lots and lots of strikes on Palestinians there and on their farms. The olive farms also, they are displacing the people, they're striking them, and so we have a real crisis in the western side, not in the Gaza Strip itself. And what the Israeli government is talking about, the Zionists are talking about, these are actually dreams. But they and then they might even be delusions. But what's happening, and I think that the European pressure and the international pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu with what's happening with the starvation crisis, will actually be if won't be in vain. But what they talked about, what Israel talked about, that the Gaza Strip will be a tomb for Palestinians. This is actually correct, because this is Israel's goal all along. They don't want a single Palestinian to make it out alive, or they have to go without ever coming back to Palestinians. They want them to leave Tel Aviv without ever coming back to Palestine, to their home. And this will be the last time that they will be in Gaza. So will the Palestinians accept this? I don't think so. I think the Palestinians are very much connected to their home. They will still fight. So there are refugees from Al-Quds, from Al-Haifa, and they want to go back to their home, and so they don't want to be displaced again. And they were displaced once. They don't want to leave again. And so they want to go back. And so the international law should guarantee that not happening. And what happened today?
Well, Dr. Dawood, the next UN General Assembly meeting will be in September. Now, you've mentioned that 15 countries, along with the US, the UK rather, and France, will be recognizing Palestinian statehood. But with an expected US veto, can recognition translate into some sort of UN action, or can European parliamentary actions maybe overcome US vetoes practically in advancing Palestinian statehood at the UN?
Well, first of all, we're talking about the General Assembly meeting where there is no U.S. veto. The U.S. veto is in the UN Security Council. And of course, the U.S. is expected to continue to block attempts to recognize the state of Palestine and the UN Security Council. But at the end of the day, it tightens the isolation of the United States. The United States might use the veto power as much as it wants, but it doesn't really like to look isolated, as we've seen in recent Security Council meetings, whereby there were 14 countries calling for the end of the war in Gaza, and the U.S. was alone in using the veto power. So again, definitely the world does not exist of the United States alone, and Israel has a lot of economic and military dealings with European nations, including France and the United Kingdom. And what remains to be seen is the stand of Germany, which is also another major influential country in the European Union. But even for Germany, despite its exceptional status due to the history of the Second World War, we've seen some increasingly critical statements by the German Prime Minister, the newly elected German Prime Minister, and even an intention to send a delegation of 3 foreign ministers from the UK, France, and Germany to press for the end of the war and for allowing unrestricted flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and also to oppose the Israeli plans for the reoccupation of Gaza and the rebuilding of settlements, as you've mentioned. Although I might like to add here, or to note here, that even within Israel, there is no agreement that the reoccupation of Gaza is the solution to end the security problem from their perspective, or even the imagination and the illusions of forcibly deporting Palestinians under the name of voluntary deportation. Because obviously, after more than 60,000 Palestinians being killed, almost half of them women and children, and the pictures that we've seen out of Gaza in terms of famine and suffering, is not going to encourage any other country to take part in this Israeli conspiracy to forcibly evict the Palestinians from their territory. So, definitely we're seeing mounting pressure, and this pressure is likely to reflect in the U.S. position in terms of asking Israel to stop this war. But also equally important, in terms of the recognition of the state, is providing a political alternative, long-term political alternative beyond the end of the war, because just ending the war is not going to settle the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and we might get to see another war again, as we have seen over the past few decades, that every 2 or 3 years Israel launches a war against Gaza, after a certain attack by Hamas or any other resistance group. So that's why a country like Egypt, Arab countries, influential ones, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates are insisting on a political path based on the recognition of the Palestinian state and the Oslo Accords and the Arab Initiative that's basically stating that peace in return for the pullout from the occupied Palestinian territories and the recognition of the Palestinian state.
Dr. Khalid Dawood, the Al-Ahram Weekly Managing Editor, and Mr. Ibrahim Al-Darawi, the writer and political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you both for your insights and this valuable discussion. As international pressure mounts and famine tightens its grip, Gaza's survival hangs in the balance. Will global conscience awaken before it's too late? We'll find out. That's all the time we have for this edition of Think Tank. I'm Henny Seif. Thank you for joining us.